Good afternoon. Welcome to another nauseating episode of Diatribes from the Voice of Doom. Now here's your noxious necromancer, Voice of Doom. Hello. Always got to have pressure. Start off for work in 45 minutes, but I figured I'd do a diatribe first. And I wanted to add a footnote or two to my last episode because I did a rather good or interesting version of connecting the mobs with Jesus. I think I did a pretty good job for an amateur. But I left out a couple things that I don't mean anything, but it's just funny and in a way ironic. First of all, I forgot why I was even talking about mobocracy. Then I went back to the YouTube because that's the only thing I watch pretty much. And I realized that I was set off because of this, Colonel Allen West was going to had a lecture at a college. And the mobs got together to cause a big ruckus because they didn't even want him to speak. And I've heard Allen West many times. And he's not exactly a, controversial powder keg. I've heard a lot worse from people that are reasonable. But he's very reasonable and soft-spoken, and he's rational. And the wokesters don't like that. And so even on the off chance that he might say anything about wokeism in his speech, they had a riot. And so I got to thinking about mobs. So that's the precursor or pretext where I talked about mobocracy. Otherwise, it's like, why talk about this? And the second really ironic thing that's nothing is I was talking about Palm Sunday, and when I was a kid and we had the palm leaves, we were in Seattle. It was very exotic. I moved to Hawaii when I was 10 or so, 11. I thought, boy, Palm Sunday is going to be a big, huge, hairy deal in Hawaii, boy, because there's a lot of palm trees. Well, it turns out they don't give you palm leaves on Palm Sunday in Hawaii. And the reason they don't do that is because palm trees are kind of sacred in a way, and you don't just cut down palm fronds for a holiday. And even cutting down a palm tree is illegal. At least it was back when I lived there. You had to take the palm tree out and ship it somewhere to be planted elsewhere, or just leave it there. So there's a lot of palm trees growing in the middle of buildings and sidewalks and walkways. They don't want to cut them down. They can't. They don't want to transplant them. Anyway, it's just ironic that they don't have palm leaves in Hawaii on Palm Sunday. They might have a processional where they put down the fronds, but it would have to be, through legislation. Now, when the news gets so heavy and there's so many bodies laying in the streets, I didn't really even notice this subway thing in New York, and I still don't notice it. It's not interesting, as that lady from the Atlantic Monthly would say. It's really not interesting because there's crime everywhere. There's atrocities everywhere in America. And whether a person lets off a canister to panic people and starts shooting at random, I don't find that much different than a guy beating up a lady for no good reason, senselessly. I equate it the same way, and when you see it day after day, it's like, oh, subway shooting, oh well. Didn't really pay it much mind. But I guess by this point they did get the guy, and, he's just a hater. Just a hater of a different shader. So how they deal with it, they can deal with it the same way they dealt with this other guy who I don't know if they've caught, who beat this Asian woman senseless. I don't see what the big beef is, but just I don't notice it much because it's just part and parcel of the same, you know, the same thesis that we're not exempt. And I'm going to go through a litany of stuff. It's the gray area. I work gray today. It's kind of a gray day. It's been a gray Holy Week. This weather has been awful. But I wanted to get that out of the way. Now, looking at gravitas more, just to see what's happening in the rest of the world. Now, Shanghai has zero tolerance. China has zero tolerance for COVID. So if a few people get it, by that I mean 22,000 people, it's not many in China, and they shut down the whole city. Shanghai's been shut down for a week. Now, people are screaming from the buildings because they're stuck and there's no food and they're being told they can't come out. It's a citywide shutdown and they're screaming. You should see it. Sounds like hell, literally. Sounds like the tribulation, okay? People screaming from buildings. All U.S. non-emergency consulate staff are leaving China, or at least leaving Shanghai, and China doesn't like that because they say you're politicizing the way we deal with the virus, and you've always been criticizing and blaming us for everything. So China's innocent. There's food shortages in China. That's why Happiness G told people to hoard like a month ago, 2 months ago. I guess the BA2 is going through, and now it's weird because you see footage from China and there's a whole bunch of people in this protective gear and face shields, and then some just have surgical gowns on and a mask, and some have masks on. They all have masks on in China, all of them. But it's just weird how these protective clothing is very scary to me when I see protective things like that. It's like I don't want my skin to touch you. Now, I don't know what's going on with that. It's just disconcerting to watch. When the city's shut down and they're screaming, you should watch it on Gravitas. Genetically modified mosquitoes to try to quell the Zika virus. So there's all kinds of viruses. I told you about Zika a while ago. Clinical trials, still worried about Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a nervous disorder that you get from vaccines sometimes. So they want to introduce genetically modified mosquitoes, and they have done it already in Florida, and they're going to release more. I don't know if American news has talked about that, but it just sounds ominous, you know, genetically modified mosquitoes, GMM. Lebanon bankrupt, Sri Lanka bankrupt. There's unrest all over the world. And there's countries going bankrupt because they're having the same inflationary problems we are, and they don't have a cushion at all. They don't have the cushion of being able to create money out of whole cloth like we do. That's why we have a budget. It's only going to be $10 trillion more dollars in the next 10 years, or 20 trillion, which is not right. It's going to be 20 more trillion in about 5 years. But those numbers are out of control. But I was thinking, man, if I could make a budget for myself, and if I didn't have enough to pay a certain bill, I could just use a credit card indefinitely and always had a credit card to pay whatever I want, then I could budget myself very easily. Life wouldn't be hard if I could create money. Now, to all you wokesters, and I mean not just the ones mobbing the colleges, and not just the ones screaming for, you know, that their kids be taught correctly in school about transgenderism. Not all those wokesters, but the wokesters that think they're really the best people because I spent extra money for an electric car. See how it works? us rich people buy things expensive, and then that brings the price down for the common, ordinary proles like you. So I'm such a good person. You want to hear how good you are? Lithium-ion batteries need cobalt. 70% of that cobalt is produced in the Congo. And if you saw the conditions under which people are fetching that cobalt, you would burn your electric car today in the middle of the street and let the noxious fumes from the batteries go out into the atmosphere and let the hazard control people come and put out the fire and drag the car away very quickly before it poisons the neighborhood. Because the conditions are deplorable, and we need cobalt for the damn lithium-ion batteries. Do you get it? You're hypocrites, and you don't even know it. You're the worst hypocrites ever. Sick of it. Check it out and see how they get the cobalt. These kids are in tunnels. They are killed. They are in very skinny little tunnels. The kids are the ones small enough to go down into the holes to just dig with their bare hands for cobalt. Now, come on. They're out there in the middle of the Congo in some mine that's not even a mine, it's a pit. It's like ancient Egypt. Probably worse. So all you people that are so happy with your cars, that you're doing the best for the environment, you better get with it, man. Because karma and cause and effect is very strict. And you may think you're doing the right thing, but you better check into it. This electric car business, no. It's not going to fly. Solar cars, I can see. Just get that. I can see that happening. But not electric cars. And it's awful. So I had a hodgepodge of crap. I'm not even going to go 15 minutes. I just wanted to wrap up, and I always say that, and then I go on for 3 more minutes. But we're not exempt, okay? I can see it, and people can see it in the media. They're starting to wake up. They're not just saying things are bad. They're saying, wait a minute, things aren't going to get any better, and they're only going to get worse. They're starting to say it, because you see who's leading. It is, what did I call that? A kakistocracy. It's getting easier to say. It's a kakistocracy. Leadership by the worst people in every country, at least the major countries. And by worst, I say morally, mentally, emotionally, and physically, the worst people. And as a coda, I will say that Xi Happiness is probably listening to those screams from Shanghai, from the building tops, the thousands and thousands of people screaming at the top of their lungs from their apartments that they're stuck in. And he's cackling to himself and chortling. And he's saying, I got you guys, didn't I? I got the ultimate revenge. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to Megwo and more of my Chinese ramblings, because he's out of his mind. He loves every minute of this. So think about all those things as we watch the decline and fall of Western civilization. I'm going to have to finish and go to work. So, l'chaim to life.